Assalamu alaikum dear viewers. In today's video, we will be discussing another very important topic of international relations, and the topic is related to power, because power is what makes nations go, and power is really important for the survival of a nation. Power is the main thing which is behind, you might call, which is behind the actual reputation of a state. If a state is powerful, it will definitely have, it will be having good reputation among the community of nations, and if a state is not powerful, then it will not be having good reputation among the community of nations. Now there are many aspects which contribute to the power of a nation. For example, it is dependent on various factors. We will be elaborating all those factors in this lecture, and stay with me till the end, and then you will come to know about different factors, different determinants of different elements of a state's power or a nation's power or the national power. So stay with me till the end. First of all, Morgenthau, he classified this power into two parts. The power of a nation or national power into two parts. Number one is the permanent classification. In his classification, there is permanent and temporary power. Then permanent and temporary factors. Then Organsky, another profound scholar, he classified these into natural and social determinants of power. So there, the opinion of authors or the opinion of philosophers of international politics and political science, it is equally divided about different aspects of power. But in this lecture, I would try to sum it up in a better position so that a basic understanding of what a national power is all about is developed in your minds. If you haven't picked up the pen and copies up till now, please pick up the pen and copies, because those who are my students and taking exam in this lecture will be taking notes for the lecture as well. So they should have their pens and copies in their hands so that they can write down different things which they want that they should keep it in their mind, so that they can recall at the time of the examination or quizzes or whatever they will be asked, in whatever mode they will be examined. Then Palmer and Perkin, Abdul Said and Theodore A. Columbus and James H. Wolfe, they divided this power and elements of national powers or determinants of national power into tangible and intangible factors. So we will be studying those as well. What are tangible factors for them? That is geography, the raw material, the natural resources, the population, the technology. They are some of the factors which they think that which they incorporate or they include in the tangible list of determinants of national power. And then there are some intangible things or intangible factors which they include in the intangible list of elements or determinants of national power, and they are ideology, morale, leadership, personality, organizational efficiency, and quality of diplomacy. These are the things which are among the intangible elements of national power. So we will explain some of the major factors which basically contribute to the power of a nation. And as I have already listed some of them, like tangible and intangible, so let's take a start about these important elements, how they contribute to the power of a country, and how, if they are not with a country, how do they contribute to the weak position of a country. The lack of them contribute to the weak position of a state or a country. So geography is one of the most important aspects of national power. Like geopolitical scientists, for example, Modi, Spikeman, Mackinder, etc., They regard geography as a determinant of international politics, as one of the determinant of international politics. If you have got a good geography, then you will be in a better position in international politics. Your country will be placed in a very good position because the geography of that particular country would be better. It would not be better, it would favor them. It would favor that country. Then another Napoleon Bonaparte, he observed that it is the geography of a country which determines the foreign policy of that country. And up till some extent, not up till some extent, up to a greater extent, it can be justified by citing various examples from international relations, various examples of various states, that the geography of those states is determining the foreign policy of those states. Take the example of Pakistan. It is kind of sandwiched between, Afghanistan's the Afghan conflict, and on the one side there is the Indian conflict or the Indian hostile neighborhood. We are experienced that. So what happens? Just look at the foreign policy of Pakistan. It is determined by these geographical factors, these facts, geographical facts. So it cannot be ignored. Then again, what is the nature and the role of geography in the national power? So number one thing, if I'll be trying to display a world map over here during the whole course of the lecture, so that you can observe this map, I'll be trying to display that map. But just look at what constitutes a geography, or what is the nature or the role of geography as an element of national power, or as a determinant of national power. So for example, map. Observers of international relations always need an atlas showing the population, the raw material, communication routes, and other data, and the ability to interpret maps. So this is the importance of geography, and in those who want to understand the international politics or international relations, they should never be oblivious about the fact that these maps and these information on the maps of countries, they are of immense importance for understanding, for developing better understanding about the surroundings, about the state of affairs in their region, or how to understand the different countries and why do they behave in such a manner. By having a thorough look into the details in atlas about those countries, you will come to know that why these states behave the way they do. Then the example of this is just take the example of Sino-Indian conflict, like the McMahon Line. It is controversial. It is a bone of contention between India and China. And the current face-off is also about this. And the 1962 conflict between India and China was also about this McMahon Line and the boundary between them. So it is about the map, whether this area is yours or this area is mine. Then take the example of the Nepalese conflict with India, which is currently being developed under the guise, or you might say that under the shadow of this larger conflict, which is the Sino-Indian conflict, or the Sino-Indian face off the current. So that is again an issue of map. So that is why map is very important, whether this part is part of your country, this piece of territory, or this piece of territory is part of another country. And if a conflictual area comes in the map, then there is a lot of problem is created. Once an international media outlet mistakenly showed the Indian held Kashmir or Indian occupied Kashmir during their news bulletin on the Pakistani side, and then the India banned that international media outlet for 5 days in India. So this is the importance of maps, and this is definitely linked to geography. Then size is another important aspect of national power. And why it is important? Because if the size of a country is huge or if it is large, then it could accommodate a huge number or a large population. Then it can also offer better natural resources to that country, which is one of the determinants of national power. Then it will also be holding raw material which are essential for the industrial development of that country. So size also matters. If the size of a country is large, if it is huge, then in most of the cases we can say, there are exceptions which I'll be discussing later on, but we can say that if the size of the country is large, that country has more probability to be a powerful one. Then it can in defense, if the size of the country is large, or if it is a large size country, then it can provide better defense as well, because in case of an attack, the army can retreat into its own areas deep within the country, and then they can relaunch an offensive on the attacking forces. So it can also provide that logistical support or that deep support to the military of the country, and it will be defended in a better position if the country is deep and the size is large. This is one aspect of it. Then for example, in the Second World War, it was the large size of the USSR, of the Soviet Union, which helped it avert an onslaught by the Nazi troops or the troops of Hitler. So it was because of the size. Initially they retreated, but then they reorganized within their own territory. They retreated and then they reorganized, and then they entrapped those soldiers. So the Nazi soldiers. So it is also very important. Then if the size of a country is huge or if it is large, so the country will be able to establish industrial complexes deep within that country, and it will be secure from the attack of the hostile states in case of a war. So, and it will be having more resources so the industries will be situated alongside the resources within that country. The industrial complexes would be situated alongside the resources. So it is also very important in this aspect. But size cannot be the only determinant, or a huge size does not mean that always it will be acting like a determinant of national power, because there are many issues related to the size of the country. For example, if there is a hard terrain, the size is huge but the terrain is hard, so then how that size can contribute to the efficiency of that populace of that nation. So then in that case it will not be contribute to the population or to the strength of that nation, that size. So there are other factors also involved along with this one factor, which is the size of the country. So we should not forget about that. For example, in 1905 Japan was a small country. It still is a small country, but in the 1905 the Russo-Japanese War, Russia was a huge state, and as we know from the history that it was for the first time that a European nation was challenged by an Asian nation, and it was the Russo-Japanese War of 1905. So Japan was a small country, Russia was a huge country, but still it was effectively challenged and defeated in a war. So size is not the only factor which determines the strength of a nation. Then take the example of Israel. It is a small country but still very much powerful than the rest of the Arab countries. There are a lot of examples. Like take the example of Great Britain. Great Britain is a small country, but due to other factors it became a very big power in the history, and even after it was stripped from the power of world leadership, from the position of world leadership, even then it has managed, due to other factors which which I will discuss later on. Due to other factors it is still effectively projecting itself. So what are those factors? Like size is a small size, but still there are factors which can. Then location is another factor. among the geography we are talking about right now. So location is another factor, and it can be helping, the location can be helping as well as hindering the national power. Now how it can be helping, for example, take the example of England again. Its location was that the English Channel was there, and the continental powers, the continental European powers could not reach, could not attack, could not cross that English Channel, because they did not need to reach out to England, but it was a necessity. It was England's need to reach out to the rest of the world and the English Channel. So on the one hand, England developed its navy because it needed to travel through seas to reach out to the continental Europe and to reach out to the rest of the world, but particularly to the continental Europe. So it developed its navy. On the other hand, the other countries, they did not think of England in those terms, so they did not focus on developing navy or naval forces. They only developed the land forces, and England was a naval power. So it contributed, it was due to its geography that it was separated from the continental Europe. Then take the example of the United States of America. Again, it is separated from the rest of the world on the one side, from one side by the Atlantic Ocean between Europe and America, and from the other side by the Pacific Ocean between Asia and like between Asia, like China, Japan and America. So this geographical location also helped both these countries, this location helped both these countries to develop and to reach out to the world rather than waiting for the world to reach there. They just reached out to the world because it was a necessity. They had to cross these waters for different purposes. So navies developed. The navies of both these countries developed. So it is because of the size. Otherwise, if you see the location of the United States of America from 1923, I think the Monroe Doctrine, when it was presented, till 1945, it remained in isolation. No country had the ability to attack the United States of America. No country had such a huge army, navy to attack the United States of America, and the United States of America tried to strengthen itself within the borders. So when it strengthened itself, developed its resources, and the current shape of the United States emerged, and in a very efficient manner, the United States of America emerged up till 1945. Then it changed its position. It came out of that splendid isolation, and then it started projecting itself on the world stage as the leader of the capitalist world up till the end of the Cold War then. So it was because of the size, because of the location, particularly the location contributed in this factor for the United States of America. So that is why it is important. Then another factor which is related to geography, that is the climate, the factor of the climate. So if the climate of a country is good, if it is a moderate climate, then that country will be prosperous. Mainly this is the case. For example, take the example of the Arctic and Antarctic areas in the world. These areas cannot be inhabited because the climate is not friendly. It is minus, it is sub-zero. So when the temperature is sub-zero, so nothing can survive in that, particularly human beings. It becomes really difficult for human beings to survive there and live a normal life. So those areas, and then take the example of those areas which are very close to the equator. They are quite hot areas. Take the examples of those areas in Africa which are close to the equator, and then you will be able to see the countries in the sub-Saharan region. So these countries haven't developed. The data shows that it is only those countries which are somehow situated to 50 to 60 degrees above the equator, then the temperature and the climate becomes inhabitable, pleasant for those countries, and over there civilizations prosper, and these countries then work for the advancement in every field, and then they become powerful countries. So the powerful countries of it is like this, that these countries which are neither too hot nor too cold, they become powerful countries. And example of the USSR is there, example of the USA is there. All the things which I have told you, they fall in, about the climate, they fall in these categories. Then the example of the Great Britain is there. It was once a huge power, a big power, so they fall in this category. Now take the example of China. They are an emerging power, almost emerged and challenged the supremacy of the United States of America. But then if you see China, China is above the equator. So it is like this that the temperature plays or the climate plays a very important role. Then topography of a country. So topography is basically related to the terrain of a country. So artificial boundaries, if a country, the terrain of the country is such that there are no natural borders with other country like river, mountains, seas. If the topography of a country is like this, that these natural barriers are not there to mark the boundary of that country, and they mark artificial boundaries, and then they erect fences. So those countries tend to be weak as compared to those who would have who would have natural boundaries. For example, rivers, seas, mountains, and then take again the example of England and the United States of America. They have natural boundaries. The seas are defining their limits. So that is that they do not have any border dispute with any country, because seas are defining their limits, and so that is why they can then become prosperous countries. And then another factor is that if then again it is related to the boundaries, but if there is a disputed boundary between two countries in the location, in the geographical location, if there is a disputed boundary between two countries, take the example of Nepal and India, India and Pakistan over the line of control, China and India, so and then India, Afghanistan, and up to some extent the matter has been settled, but once there was an issue of Durand line. So when there is a dispute over border or over boundary, then those countries also remain comparatively weak, because they always think about their enemy and how to defeat the enemy. They kind of indulge themselves in arms race with their enemy, so that they can secure their boundary, and they can snatch back, or they can take back those areas which have been snatched from them by their adversary. So it is boundary is also one of the most important factors of this is the subfield of geographical location or geography of a country. So boundary is also very important. Sorry. Then there is natural resources. Natural resources also, after geography we have this natural resources now. So natural resources also plays a very important role in contributing to the national power of a country. How do they do it? For example, if nature has bestowed gifts on a country, for example, raw material is there in that country, minerals are there in that country, so what would happen? It would definitely be like the raw material would be used for their industry, so the country will become prosperous, industrialized and prosperous. So this raw material, this natural resources plays a very important role in that. Then you can take again the example of the United States of America, that it has got a lot of land, so a lot of natural resources are there. It is almost self-sufficient in the natural resources. So that is why the United States of America has become a powerful country. Now if we try to analyze this natural resources, so the natural resources can be divided into two parts. Number one, that is the raw material, and number two, that is food. So in the raw material there are minerals then like zinc, tin, manganese, uranium, etc., petrol, everything comes in the raw material. And then there are natural products, for example, rubber, jute, and medicinal plant, wood pulp, etc., etc. So One is mineral, the other is the natural products, and then there are animal products, for example milk, egg and dairy products. You can call it dairy products, and wool and everything. So these are among the natural resources or the raw material which contribute somehow to the industry. They are raw material for the industry. All these things which I have mentioned, they are raw material for the industry. So it is important for the industrialization of that country that these raw material should be with that country, and if the natural resources are there and the raw material is it is adequate over there, then it becomes convenient for that country to become industrialized. It becomes easy for that country, because it would not be importing raw material for its industry. So it is also very important in this manner. And then we have seen that those countries which are in the possession of the raw material, for example the OPEC countries, oil is there with them, the crude oil is there with them, so they have a monopoly over the oil market. You can see their monopoly. The moment they want, they can raise the prices of the oil. The moment they want, they can decrease the prices of the oil. For example, by increasing the supply, they will decrease the prices of the oil. By curtailing the supply, they will increase the prices of the oil. Previously, we have noticed a few months back, we have noticed a slump in the oil demand due to COVID-19, and then due to the increased supply by the Saudi Arabia and Russia. There was an oil war going on between them. So the oil prices in the international market plummeted. But now the OPEC countries have decided, the OPEC Plus have decided that they will have to, since the supply of the oil has been curtailed, the demand of the oil has been curtailed across the globe. So now they are planning that they will have to produce 5% less than whatever the demand of the world is at any time. So now the supply will always be 5% less than the demand, so the prices of the oil will remain stable for them, and the oil prices would go up. It is a point of concern for Pakistan as well, that what would Pakistan do, that the 5% less demand means that the oil will be purchased by the rich countries, and then what would the poor countries do in this scenario? But that is another issue for another video, maybe for my small vlogs, but not for a lecture over here. Okay, then food is another aspect of the natural resources. So in food, what happens, that any country which has achieved self-sufficiency in the food, it becomes easy for that particular country to focus on other aspect of the national power and become prosperous or become successful, or become successful in achieving those aspects, because the food, which is a necessity, which is a basic necessity, so that need or that requirement of that country has already been taken care of, because the natural resources with that country, it also holds food in it. So the food supply is there for that country. So the acute food problem does not become for them, or food security does not become a problem for them. Then there is another very good saying, that armies travel on their stomach. So if your country is self-sufficient in food, it will be a contributing factor to the stronger defense of that country as well. So that is why we cannot ignore the efficacy or of food while evaluating the national power of a country. So if a country has got this food with it, self-sufficiency in food, probability is that country would easily become or achieve all of the rest of the elements of national power. Then population is again an element of national power, because even if there is industrialization and everything is there and mechanized life is being spent these days, but behind every machine there is a man is needed. So population, that is why population is also very important. But the mere number of population does not matter. If this is just the mere number of population, then you can see that the number of population of China and the number of the population of India is almost equivalent. But you can see the huge gap between the level of development in China and the level of development between the level of development of China and the level of development of India. You can see this huge gap. So it is not only the number of population, it is the quality of population as well. So quality of population, again, it is education, skilled labor, or the scale of the people. So if these people, the population is skilled, they are highly educated, they are understanding about a lot of issues, they have understanding, and they are understanding the issues of their country. So, and then they behave in that manner because they are educated, they are well mannered as well, you know. So unlike the South Asian population, the population of China is very much developed, very much skilled, very much educated, and then we can see the difference between the level of development in China and another rival of China in the region, which is India. So we can see the level of difference between the two populations, between the two countries, and population, the level or the quality of their population that is why it matters. So we can if we need to think about the importance of population for a country. So there are some factors, there are some aspects like population. It is important for the military power because soldiers are needed for military, so population is required for that. Population is required to fully exploit the natural resources of a country. If there are no the population, or the skilled manpower is not there, then the utilization of the natural resources of that country would also be a problem for the country. Then population also determines national needs as well as policy designed to serve these needs. So population also determines these things, like, you know, if the population is huge, so the national needs are greater in number. But then if the population is educated, so it will also determine the policy. Better leadership will emerge from that population, and because the majority of that is educated, so better leadership will emerge, and it can be somehow influencing the educated and the skilled population will be in a better position to influence the policy making of a country as well. So it is in that particular aspect that it is very important. So that is one aspect. Then we have economic development and the industrial capacity of a country. That is after the population. This is another aspect, or the aspect number 4 of the development of industrial capacity. So the development of industrial capacity and the economic development is aspect 4. Both of them are you can call it like after the population they come. So I think aspect 5 or aspect 4, whatever is the number with you, but they come in that aspect. And because economy is very important, and the development of economic development is dependent age. The economic development is dependent on the industrial development in the current age and time, in the current phase in time. So economic development is important, and we cannot deny that economically less developed country would be industrially developed, because industrial development is dependent on the economic development. So then the industrial capacity is again, which is linked with the economic development. So if a country is economically developed, it will be in a better position to spend on further research in science and technology, on innovation, and developing its industry, establishing its industry, installing its industry, spending on its industry, giving subsidies to the industries, to the weak industries, because it is economically developed country and it can afford to do so. So that will be, and then, you know, agriculture is also an industry. So agriculture industry, spending on agriculture industry will also in other words benefit that country. So industrial development and industrial capacity and economic development, they also make very important factor of national power. But all these factors, they are dependent on other factors as well. These factors alone, any of these factors alone cannot contribute to the national power. So you need to keep it in mind. It is just a combination of all these factors. So that thing should be clear in your mind. Then technology is another aspect, that a country will be more powerful if that country has got an edge in technology over other countries. Take the example of the United States of America. Again, I am saying, before the United States of America, just look at the level of industrial development in the United Kingdom, in Great Britain, and then just study the history of the Great Britain. It ruled almost all of the continents. So the sun never set on in the borders of the United Kingdom, and it was true because it was ruling all over the continent, in almost all of the continents on the globe. And now take the example of the United States of America, and it is just because of technological development. The other factors are contributing towards this technological developments. You need to keep it in mind. But in current age, when some of those factors which are with the United States of America, some of other countries have also got these factors, but still, since they are less developed, technologically less developed than the United States of America, so they are a few steps behind the United States of America, because they are technologically less developed. So this technological development also contributes to the national power. But this is not the only contributor, and this is not the only factor which determines the level of national power in a country. So you need to keep it in mind. Then military preparedness is another aspect which contributes to the elements of national power. And military preparedness, you can say that it is the military behind your foreign policy. If your military is strong, you will be in a better position to implement your foreign policy assertively, and exercise at your diplomacy would be in a better position to focus on the foreign policy of a country, because the backing of the military is with that country, and the military is very much advanced. So then that will be contributing towards the rest of the elements of national power. And alone it cannot do anything, because economy also matters. So if the military is strong and the economy is weak, then the military will be constrained, because ultimately the military needs to spend on defense and everything. So if these defense spending and these things are, the economy is not able to provide for the needs of the military, then the mere strong military would not be able to do anything. So other things are also required in that. So what are the factors? What is meant by the military preparedness? There are basically three factors if we try to evaluate or analyze the level of military preparedness. That is the war technology and technological innovation. So if a country's military has got this war technology and the technological innovation, like we see with the United States of America, they have got this war technology, and then the technological innovation like the drone technology, you can see that, and what not. I'm not an expert of defense and strategic studies, so I cannot comment on that very well, but this is the technological innovation in military matters a lot. And then military leadership and the quality and quantity of soldiers. So military leadership, if the military leadership is not compromised, and if it is patriotic, and if it is daring, and if it is intelligent, and it can put a well designed, well devised plan on the table for its enemy, so that also comes under the umbrella of military preparedness, or under the military preparedness. Then quality and quantity of the soldiers. So yeah, the number of the soldiers might be great, but the quality of the soldiers would not be sufficient. For example, take the example of you might call India and Pakistan. Pakistan has got almost less than half of the Indian military. The number of Indian military may be less than half of what the number of Indian military is. I think Pakistan has got some 0.7 million and India is 2.3 or 2.1 million. So it is almost 1/3 or more than half, something like that. If I'm not, please confirm these figures, because right now they are skipping my mind, but it is something like that. So the number of their military is far greater than the number of the military or the quantity of the Pakistani military. But then you can see the position that what happened on the 27th of February 2019, that they could not do anything, and their planes were shot down when they were chasing Pakistani planes, Pakistani Air Force planes, which entered their territory to give a befitting response to the Balakot incident, in which they claim that they had killed a lot of people, so-called terrorists they call, but none of the people were killed. It was a few trees and I think few birds, and that's it. But still, Pakistan, the airspace of Pakistan had been violated, so Pakistan had to come up with a response, and then it came up with a response, and then it just gave this message very vivid, clear and loud to the Indian military establishment. So then if you see the number, if you see the military spending of both the countries, and then when you compare it with the quality which I have explained with the help of an example from 2019, so then you can see the quality. So these things also come in military preparedness, and it matters. It contributes toward the determinants of national power. Then the non-tangible, or you might, then these non-tangible elements of national power, some of them are like, ideology is one of those non-tangible which cannot be seen, but it is there. So ideology is one of those factors. You can see the source of strength, the source of strength for all of the communist countries before the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. It was just the ideology. The communist ideology was there, and it was the source of strength for them. Then again, among the capitalist bloc, if you see those European countries and those North American countries, which are the supporters of the United States of America, and they are close allies and NATO members, and they have got the same set of ideology, which is which is the capitalist ideology, and their values and everything is the same. So that is also a source of strength. Ideology is a source of strength, and if there is a weak ideology, then it can be a source of weakness for that particular state. Then you see, if we talk about the prime time of the Islamic history, so it was the Islamic ideology which made the Muslims rule almost the whole of Europe except a few areas and these North African areas. And so it was the Islamic ideology for as long as the Muslims were practicing it in its true spirit. So it gave them, a rise on the world stage, and Muslims were a power on the world stage. But when but later on, when they were corrupted and they did not focus on their ideology, and they forgot about the basic tenets of the ideology in practice. So then they were replaced by other powerful countries and other powerful civilizations on the world stage. So then again, another thing, which is leadership. Leadership also matters, because it is the leader of the quality of the leadership. If a leader is like, you can take the example of a driver, that the country is like the vehicle with the driver, and a leader is that driver. So the vehicle might be good, it would have all the resources, its tank would be full of fuel, everything would be there, but if the driver does not know how to drive it, so it would become a problem for the leader for the nation to go forward, because the leadership is not able. It is not able leadership. The country does not have an able leadership with it. So then it becomes a problem for the country. Then again, the civil military relations. So if the leadership is intelligent in that country, I'm talking about the civilian leadership. If the leadership is intelligent in that country, he would be in a better position to avoid the civil military conflict or confrontation in that state, so that the country can become prosperous, and the rest of the elements which are there to contribute towards the national power are utilized in a better and proficient manner. Then organization and the quality of the government is also another very important aspect. If the quality of the government is not that good, and if the government is weak, if it cannot implement its rate in the country, so that despite the fact that the country would be having all of the elements of the national or determinants of the national power, but if the government is loose, it will not be in a better position to organize, to utilize all those resources, because of conflict, because of weaknesses within the ranks of the government, and then a problem might arise. Take the example of Pakistan in this regard right now, that the prices of petrol have been brought down, but since the government machinery is quite weak, so the cartelization is quite much active, and there are many cities in which petrol is not available on petrol pumps. So the relief which the government intended to give to the people has become a curse for the government now. It could have been a blessing for the government had the government performed efficiently in this manner and given this relief to the people effectively. But now it has become so everything is there, but this thing cannot contribute to the power of the nation right now. And if the country is weak from within, and there are scuffles and strifes in the country all the time, then this country would have to first curb all these scuffles and strifes within its border, and then it will project outwardly to present itself as a strong country. So if these things at internal level are there, then the country cannot project itself on external to be a strong country on external level. Then the national character and the national morale. So what is a national character? The national character, let me read it from this document. The national character is a collective name for referring to the traits of people, their attitude and aptitude towards work and national needs. So it is the collective trait of a nation. The collection of the traits of individual becomes a collective trait. So it is the collective trait of a nation. So if the character of a nation is strong, like if the character of the individuals in that nation is strong in a greater number, the number of those individuals in a country is more, whose character is strong, who have got good traits, then the national character of that country would be termed as good. So it will contribute to the behavior of the state, on the international stage, and then people among the committee of nations would regard that country as a powerful country because of some specific characteristics of its people, which become the national character of that state. Then the national morale. So the national morale is also, morale in Urdu, in Urdu we can call it hosla, bahadri, whatever, jazba, you can call it like this. So in the national morale there is a definition of, let me search for it, there is a definition of Hans J. Morgenthau about it, and that definition is the degree of determination with which a nation supports the foreign policy of its government in peace and war. It permeates all activities of a nation. its agriculture and industrial productions, as well as its military establishments and diplomatic service. So this is the level of support of the nation for the policies of the government, which contributes towards the national power of a country. So again, take the example of Pakistan. Let me give you the example of Pakistan. What happens in Pakistan? There is always a huge gap, a huge divide between different sections of the population over different issues, which might be at times non-issues, but they would become issues just for some vested interest by some people, for their vested interest. So then these kind of attitudes of the people, they do not contribute towards the national character or the national morale of that country. So when they do not contribute to the morale of the country, it's not like a good morale of the country. So the morale of the country or the morale of the nation is not good, then it will not be contributing towards the national power of that country, because people would be demoralized in the country. And as a result of the fifth generation warfare, this is what is happening right now in Pakistan, that a huge section of the society feels demoralized because of a lot of negative news which are always coming on your television screens, and positivity is rarely shown. So it is to demoralize the nation, and the nation is demoralized. So this national morale is also very important. Then diplomacy. Morgenthau regards diplomacy as one of the most important elements of the national power, and I have already discussed some of the aspects of diplomacy in my previous class, so I will not be going into detail about diplomacy. But in short, diplomacy is that apparatus through which you execute your foreign policy, or through which the intent of your country travels to other country through the arm of diplomacy. So this that travels to other country through diplomacy. I have explained it in the previous class, so you can go there and you can watch that area of that video in which I have been talking about diplomacy. So I should not be talking about it anymore. And yeah, the Great Britain right now, just see the example of the Great Britain. Despite the fact that it has got small size and its status of a world leader has long been taken away by the United States of America, still the Great Britain is effectively implementing its diplomacy. Its diplomacy is really effective. So it has been able to project itself as a world power even in this time. Even currently, it has been able to project itself as a world power. It is because of diplomacy. So that is why diplomacy is really, really important, and we cannot ignore the fact that diplomacy should be taken care of. Then there are some other elements which some of the scholars, along with these elements which I have explained, some of the scholars add these few more elements with this, and that is, number one is the reputation of a country. So if the reputation of a country is good, like for example, if it is considered by other countries that okay, this is a nation which can avert any kind of threat for its security and its existence, so that reputation will contribute towards the national power of that country. Then the foreign support and the links. So if a country is well connected, if it has got good relations with other country, the quality of diplomacy comes over here again. So it will be in a better position to project itself, and then it will contribute to the national power of that country, because it will be having links with other countries, and no adversary would be able to challenge this country, because the adversary would always think that this country has got alliances or links with this and that country, and if I somehow try to meddle in the affair of this country, I will have to face many enemies on behalf of this one country alone. So it's better to avoid taking risks with this country. And then the level of preparedness of a country, for example, if natural calamity comes, what will be the weaknesses, what will be the level of response of that country towards those natural calamities. Take the level of response of China towards COVID-19 and then compare it with the response of the rest of the countries towards it. So you will come to know about the level of preparedness of a country towards the accidents. So this also contributes towards the national power, and this is one of the prime factors that China is currently challenging the United States of America, the position of the United States of America as the sole superpower of the world, because it was well equipped to cope with this outbreak of COVID-19, while the rest of the world is not well equipped. So that is another aspect. And then accidents, like for example, all of a sudden a country realizes that okay, it has got oil reserves and oil has been explored in that country. So then how to cope with that scenario if oil has already been, like for example, if minerals have been explored in the country, so how to cope with that scenario. So take the example of the African countries. They have a lot of mineral natural resources, everything is there. The diamonds have been explored, gold has been explored, but what happens that they are not able, they do not have the required apparatus to take care of their resources. So foreigners, other countries, powerful countries, agents of the powerful countries are there, and they are plundering those resources. So this aspect is also should be taken care of, that how to deal with accidents and how to deal with accidental calamities and accidental explorations. So if that thing is there with those countries, then you can call it that these are some of the elements. It is contributing towards the elements of national power. Again, there is an example of Pakistan in my mind, but since the time is quite limited, I'm trying to finish it up. So that is why I'm not giving that example right now, but you can ask me in the class whenever we will be having this Q&A session for this lecture. So you can ask me in the class. Okay, and then how do you measure this national power? Okay, a country is how much powerful? How do you measure this? All these things are there, but then how do you measure it? This is also a very technical thing. So there are three factors through which you can measure these national power. Number one is domain of the national power. Number two is the range of the national power. And number three is the scope of the national power. Now, what is the domain of the national power? Like, a set of how much people are influenced, how many people are within the domain of that particular country. So if a country is powerful and there is a lot of population of that country within the domain of that country, so that is one aspect of the national power. The domain is quite wide because a lot of population is there. And then how many people abroad are within the domain of that country, which we call the sphere of influence of a country. So that is again domain, right? So take the example of capitalist of the United States of America and its allies. So the US is a great power because people accept it as a great power, and they are in the sphere of influence of the United States of America. Likewise, USSR was a great power, and it was due to its influence in its sphere, not only on its people, but in its sphere of influence, like the countries who were its allies, which were its allies. So that is the domain of the country. Then the range of the power, what is the range? Like, how hard you can punish your enemy, that is one range. And how well you can reward your friend, that is another range. So take the example of the United States of America again, like Afghanistan and Iraq, they were their enemies. How hard these countries were punished. And then take the example of its allies, like the European Union and Australia and these countries. So how well they have been rewarded by the United States of America. So if you talk about this, if you think about national power in this aspect, so it will become easy for you to assess whether a country is powerful or not. Okay, and then the scope of the national power, or the scope of the power, is that the set or collection of all the particular classes of behavior, relations and affairs that are effectively subjected to the government power, right? So that is the scope, that how effectively different classes, different relations of different classes, different behaviors of people in your country and abroad are subjected to the government power, to the power of that government. So then we can say that this is the scope. It has, a very vast scope. People in country and abroad accept the whatever the president or the prime minister of this particular country says. Okay, I think we need to stop this lecture over here, because it has almost been 1 hour, and I have almost concluded most of the aspect of the national power. There are some aspects which I will be trying to present in another part of this lecture, but this part of the lecture I think that we should stop it over here. But just keep it in mind that these aspects of national power, these elements or these determinants of national power, they alone cannot be sufficient to contribute towards the national power. It is the combination of these factors, the combination of the human and the material factors, which contribute towards the national power. If this combination is not there, and if a country has got a lot of resources, for example natural resources, but if it is unable to exploit it, so it is not, these natural resources, they become a ban for this country, they become a curse for the country, not a blessing. Take the example of the African countries, which I have already quoted or cited. So I think that this point has been quite well explained, elaborated. If you have some question, you can, if you are my students and you're watching it for the purpose of the class, so you can ask me in the class in the Q&A. And if you are my general viewer and you are watching this, so you can comment under the video, and then I'll respond to your comments either in the comment section or by making another video about it, or the remaining aspect of this national power or determinants of national power. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, press the subscribe button, press the bell icon, select the all notifications, so that you get all the notifications for my upcoming videos and vlogs, lectures and vlogs on a regular basis. Thank you very much for watching. Allah Hafiz.